Yeah, the question comes, I guess, in the context of we just finished the Olympic Games here in Canada, and there was a huge program called Own the Podium. A lot of money was put into, I suppose, supporting the elite athletes, and the justification for that was that if we get them onto the podium, it will inspire a whole bunch of other things, and it'll filter down, and the entire society will become energized by it. Playing devil's advocate, is that kind of public money being spent responsibly? I mean, is there actually a social value to investing that much money in elite amateur athletes?
Can we start that one again?
I love it. That was so good. He said double.
I mean, basically,
That's a tough question.
I mean, it's the question which is, what is it? No, but if I'm Joe Schmo from Eyebrow, Saskatchewan, and I just found out that $5 from my precious tax money ended up in this Own the Podium program, and I can't buy the seed to put into the field because there's been drought and all this. I mean, how do you deal with that? It is the ultimate fundamental question. Is there a social value to sport? I mean, does it help that guy to be watching the Olympic Games to see somebody win moguls? Somebody from Quebec he's never heard of before, and or skeleton, a sport that he might not even think makes a lot of sense, especially if you're in Saskatchewan where it's pretty flat. I mean, there's only a couple of places in Canada, and we have more than anyone else in the world that have the kind of facilities to do that kind of sport. Can you understand the attitude which would say, no, this is not money well spent?
Yeah, I can understand that. I think that it's interesting for the Olympics in Vancouver that I was not in Canada. I didn't have the opportunity to see very little of the events at all because we were traveling with the pro team in Cuba. But I did get to see a couple events, and the interesting thing was when I returned from the travels and the Olympics, had ended. All the people, I mean, I'm a former athlete, so maybe I got it more than other people that aren't athletes or involved in sport, but I got the buzz. Like, people were saying, did you see the events? Man, it was amazing. Like the Canadian Olympics in Vancouver were phenomenal, and our athletes did so well. And I just from a lot of people, I got the buzz that people felt good about what was going on. And if people are feeling good, I think that's a pretty strong social value. And as a country in Canada, often we don't boast enough about what a great country we are and how well we do on the international scene. And I mean, we don't have to necessarily compare ourselves, but I think that the buzz I got was that it's money well spent because Canadians feel good, and feeling good is pretty important in life.
So people have come up to you and said, you got me into cycling. What got you into cycling? Go back to the very beginning. What turned you into the person you are now, but the person also that you were when you first got on a bike and thought, maybe I can do Tour de France?
I can remember, riding my first bike. Obviously I started on a trike, but I can remember riding my first bike. That was probably too big for me, and the other kids around the block used to race up and down the streets and get into trouble. But I think, at a certain age, the bike was a bit of freedom. Like, it was, I didn't need a car, didn't need to hitch a ride, but I could go anywhere on a bike, right? So go to baseball practice, go see my buddies, go down the street, get into trouble, whatever it was. You get out there and get on your own. It was just a wonderful thing, and I just loved riding my bike. I think that was the initial part of it, to be so passionate about cycling. I just love to do it.
But what made that passion, which is nothing like the ambition to ride internationally, what changed you from being a guy who liked riding his bike and going to baseball practice to being a guy who's thinking about competing on the international level?
I guess a bit of fate. It's not like I didn't choose to be a pro racer. Somewhere along the way that I became involved in that. The answer to your question, I guess, it was one summer I was playing some soccer, and I wasn't really a good soccer player, and I wasn't going to make the NHL, so I had to find something, I guess. But my mother, in fact, it was really sort of my mother that said, you should check out that cycling club in St. Catharines. They have some good racers down there. Karen Strong and Gord Singleton were making newspaper headlines. They were, some of Canada's best athletes and won world medals. At the time they hadn't, but they were on their way to. So I went down and checked out the club, and went to see a race and watched the race, and I was inspired by it immediately, and started riding with the club, and that was the start. That was the start for my racing career.
And obviously, if you were to advise somebody who was at that point right now, you would still say, go ahead. Like, you've got no misgivings about what happened to you over the course of your life.
Yeah, I think the cycling club, and I guess I mentioned before, that social network, where you have athletes, you have coaches, you have people that love the sport, and it's not just cycling club; it could be golf club or hockey club or basketball club. That's the entry point, for people to be international athletes, because you're not going to jump into pro tour team. You're going to start with your social network, whether it's in small town Fenwick, St. Catharines, or it's in Toronto, wherever it is. And that was how I started, and that goes back to the social aspect, because a club is not only performance, but it's also a social network, where you have leaders and mentors and kids, and it's part of the social network of a society.
I'm going to play devil's advocate again on the whole elite athlete funding, public funding per se, and value of it. I mean, what would you say to a farmer in Saskatchewan who can't buy enough seed to plant grain for the next year, when he finds out that X $1 million, and in fact, not even that, probably, is being put into funding elite athletes in Canada? I mean, is there a social value to that level of sport? And we can talk about the more grassroots level later.
I think if the only thing we spent money on in Canada was sport, you could bring that argument into the realm, but we spend tax money on so many different projects. We spend it on many different aspects of our society, and elite athletes is one very valuable aspect. Education is another extremely valuable aspect. Health is another extremely valuable aspect. So to be able to put a magnifying glass on one and say, or expect it to have the responsibility to bring the entire society up to the level that it should, is asking a very unfair question.
It's probably another unfair question, I suppose, but I was a marathon runner. I ran 19 marathons, and because I'm a journalist, I got to meet a whole bunch of really elite marathon runners, and in my interactions with all of them, to a person, they treated me no differently than they treated one another. The fact that I was in the middle of the pack in the marathon didn't make any difference to them. I'd run 19 marathons. That was good enough. It made me, I was part of the fraternity. Is it the same in all sport? Do athletes at your level think of those who aren't at that level yet, or never will be at that level, in a different way? Or is there a sisterhood, brotherhood amongst all the people who compete in a particular event?
I could speak for cycling. I definitely agree with Steve that it is the hardest sport in the world, but I'm completely biased. And it doesn't matter what level you're at, you know what that person's feeling when they're climbing a mountain or when they're battling it out in a sprint, and that person is going to their extreme place, and you can connect with that on any level. That's why it's so exciting to watch the Tour de France or to watch any of the bike races, even if you're never going to participate in it, because you can connect on that level in your own way.
So there is a social value to sport.
Mm-hmm, definitely.